Thomas Harper had vanished without a trace, and Officer Garrett Cole was the only one who dared follow the trail into the shadowed mountains, an instinctive choice that would unravel secrets powerful enough to divide the entire state of Wyoming. Elk Ridge was the kind of town where everyone's life seemed to move at the same slow, predictable pace. Tucked between the sweeping plains and the jagged edges of the Bighorn Mountains, it was a place where neighbors greeted each other at the mailbox and children roamed freely through open fields. The town had always taken pride in its safety. Crime was almost non-existent, and the thought of something truly sinister happening there felt almost absurd. People trusted one another, and strangers were noticed almost immediately. It was a community built on routine, familiarity, and an unspoken agreement that danger existed only somewhere beyond the horizon. The calm was shattered one crisp autumn morning when news spread like wildfire. A local rancher, Thomas Harper, had disappeared. He was a man known by everyone in town, a fourth-generation rancher who had spent his entire life on the sprawling lands his family had owned for decades. His absence was not only unusual, it was impossible to ignore. Harper had not been seen leaving town, and his truck had been discovered abandoned on a narrow dirt road that snaked toward the mountains. The engine was still running, the keys dangling from the ignition, and his jacket and personal items were untouched on the seat. The scene offered no clues, only questions. The residents of Elk Ridge gathered in small clusters, sharing theories and worries. Some suggested he had gone hunting and simply gotten lost, while others whispered darker possibilities, hinting that the wide-open spaces of Wyoming could conceal dangers even the most cautious person might never foresee. Despite the speculation, nobody could explain why Harper's tracks disappeared abruptly at the edge of the forest, as if he had vanished into thin air. The disappearance was unsettling because it defied the town's sense of order and safety. Officer Garrett Cole, the sheriff assigned to Elk Ridge, arrived quickly. Cole was a man known for his keen instincts and unshakable confidence, someone the town had relied on for years in times of trouble. He examined the scene carefully, noting the way the tracks led into the dense forest before stopping abruptly. While many assumed the rancher might have wandered off, Cole sensed something more sinister was unfolding. He walked the perimeter of the area, scanning the horizon, the trees, and the underbrush, aware that a mistake could mean losing vital evidence. Cole's experience told him that disappearances like this rarely happened without cause. The stillness of the surrounding woods felt almost unnatural, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. As the hours passed, concern in the town grew. Helicopters were called in to sweep the area, neighbors offered to search, and local news crews began to trickle into Elk Ridge. Yet, despite the attention, the forest held its secrets tightly. Cole's instincts pulled him toward a darker possibility. Harper had not simply wandered away. There was evidence, subtle but compelling, that someone had been in the area recently. Footprints not belonging to Harper, a faint scent of smoke in the air, and broken branches suggested movement that did not belong to the wild or wildlife. The sheriff knew that uncovering the truth would require venturing further into territory no one in the town had dared to explore, and that whatever he found could change the town forever. By nightfall, Elk Ridge felt different. The normally comforting expanse of land now seemed intimidating and mysterious. Residents locked their doors, whispered fears circulated in homes, and the comforting rhythm of daily life was replaced with tension. Harper's disappearance was no longer just a personal tragedy, it was a puzzle that cast a shadow over the entire community. Cole stood at the edge of the dirt road, staring into the darkness of the forest. He understood that the quiet town he had always known might never feel safe again, and that the first step into those woods could lead him into something far more dangerous than anyone in Elk Ridge could have imagined. Officer Garrett Cole had always trusted his instincts, and on that evening they were screaming at him to take action. As he scoured the area around Harper's abandoned truck, his attention was drawn to a dark SUV parked several hundred yards off the road, partially hidden behind a cluster of pine trees. It had no license plates and the windows were tinted so heavily that he couldn't see inside. By protocol, he should have called for backup, waited for reinforcements, and approached with caution. But something about the vehicle, its isolation, the way it seemed almost deliberately concealed, pulled at him. He felt an urgent need to investigate it immediately. The decision weighed heavily on him as he approached. The forest was thick, the ground uneven, and shadows stretched in unpredictable shapes. Every crunch of leaves under his boots made him hyper-aware of the silence around him. The SUV looked deserted, but Cole knew better than to assume. He circled it, inspecting the tires, the doors, even the interior visible through the glass. Nothing seemed out of place at first glance, but the air around the vehicle felt wrong, tense, expectant, as though it were a marker for something hidden just beyond sight. Trusting his instincts, Cole decided to follow the faint tracks leading away from the SUV into the mountains. The path was narrow and winding, moving deeper into territory few people in Elk Ridge had ever explored. The forest grew denser, the temperature dropped, and the wind seemed to whisper through the pines in a way that set his nerves on edge. Hours passed as he carefully navigated, each step forward carrying a mix of anticipation and dread. Then, tucked away in a small clearing, he found it, a cabin, almost invisible from the main path. It looked aged, abandoned, and untouched for years, yet Cole could immediately sense its significance. Inside, evidence of recent habitation startled him. There were food wrappers on a rough wooden table, a makeshift bed in the corner, and scattered personal belongings. Most shocking of all was a journal belonging to Thomas Harper. The pages revealed that the rancher had been aware of something dangerous, something tied to secret dealings that involved powerful people in the state. Harper had documented meetings, threats, and transactions that painted a picture of corruption and intimidation running deeper than anyone in Elk Ridge could have imagined. Cole's heart raced as he realized the disappearance might not be a simple case of a lost man, but part of a much larger, more sinister web. He knew he had to leave to gather reinforcements, but as he stepped back outside, the cabin had changed. Where he had seen evidence moments ago, there was now emptiness. It was as if the place had never been inhabited at all. The food wrappers were gone, the bed stripped, and the journal missing. The tracks leading to and from the cabin had vanished. Whoever had been there had moved quickly and with purpose, erasing any trace of their presence. Cole stood frozen, understanding that he had stumbled into something dangerous, something orchestrated with meticulous care. The realization hit him that Harper had been hiding for a reason and that the forces behind these disappearances were clever, patient, and aware. As he retraced his steps back toward the SUV, the forest felt alive with unseen eyes. Shadows shifted with unnatural precision, and every rustle in the underbrush made him pause. He knew that leaving the area without the proper support could risk losing Harper forever or worse, putting himself in harm's way. Cole's single decision to follow his instincts into the mountains had opened a door to secrets that no one in Elk Ridge was ready to face. It was the beginning of a chain of events that would challenge the town's sense of security, the boundaries of law enforcement, and the line between right and wrong. The night closed in, heavy and silent, as he made his way back, carrying the weight of knowledge he could not yet share and a sense that the real danger was only just beginning. Word of Officer Cole's discovery spread faster than anyone in Elk Ridge could have anticipated. By the next morning, the small town was buzzing with speculation and fear. Some residents celebrated Cole's courage, hailing him as a hero for uncovering evidence that suggested the disappearances were not random accidents but part of a far-reaching conspiracy. Others, however, saw his actions as reckless, criticizing him for venturing alone into the mountains without backup and potentially putting both himself and Thomas Harper in danger. The debate fractured the town into factions, each convinced their perspective was correct. Newspapers and television crews arrived, drawn by the intrigue of a quiet Wyoming town suddenly at the center of a mystery. Headlines varied wildly, some framing Cole as the sheriff who risked everything to reveal a hidden truth, others accusing him of negligence and poor judgment. The conflicting narratives fueled tension not just within Elk Ridge but throughout the surrounding region. Social media erupted with comments, videos, and speculation, spreading the story beyond state lines. Residents found themselves confronted by outsiders seeking answers, and the normally peaceful town felt under siege by attention it had never wanted. As the divide deepened, another disappearance occurred nearby, raising the stakes. This time, the victim was a local hunter who had been last seen near the same mountains Cole had explored. Panic rippled through the community. Many blamed Cole, claiming his earlier actions had provoked dangerous individuals or exposed others to harm. Others argued the new disappearance confirmed his warnings that the situation was bigger than anyone had imagined. Fear became a constant presence, and the sense of security that had defined Elk Ridge for generations evaporated almost overnight. Tensions also spread into the political sphere. Local leaders were pressured to respond, and questions arose about the effectiveness of law enforcement in handling high-profile cases. State officials became involved, further complicating the situation. Public meetings were held, often ending in heated arguments. The town's citizens were forced to confront the unsettling reality that corruption, secrecy, and danger might exist in their own backyard. Families huddled together, neighbors whispered about hidden motives, and trust, once taken for granted, became a fragile commodity. Amid the turmoil, Officer Cole remained focused on the facts and the investigation. Despite the criticism, he continued to follow leads, studying Harper's journal and retracing the paths through the mountains. Every detail mattered, and he knew that solving the case could prevent further disappearances, yet the emotional toll was undeniable. The scrutiny, the accusations, and the fear surrounding him created a pressure unlike anything he had experienced before. He had intended to protect his town, but his actions had inadvertently made Elk Ridge a symbol of a statewide crisis, dividing friends, neighbors, and even families along lines of belief and trust. By the end of the week, the town's atmosphere had transformed. Conversations that once centered on daily routines now revolved around suspicion, uncertainty, and fear. People watched one another carefully, some seeking answers, others guarding secrets of their own. Elk Ridge was no longer just a quiet town nestled between plains and mountains. It had become a stage for conflict, scrutiny, and investigation. The initial disappearance, Cole's daring choice, and the ripple effects of his actions had changed the town forever. The quiet order that had defined life there was gone, replaced with tension that extended far beyond the mountains, touching every part of the community and leaving the state of Wyoming divided in ways few could have predicted. Cole refused to be deterred by the growing tension in Elk Ridge. The townspeople's arguments and the media attention pressed in on him, but he focused on the evidence he had gathered and the journal left behind by Thomas Harper. Each entry revealed more than simple notes. They were a chronicle of threats, hidden meetings, and transactions that suggested the rancher had uncovered a network of corruption and illegal land deals. Cole realized the disappearances were not isolated incidents, but pieces of a much larger puzzle that stretched across the state. Every page he read hinted at powerful people who would go to great lengths to protect their secrets. Determined to uncover the truth, Cole revisited the forest where he had first found the cabin. The terrain was unforgiving, the trees dense and the shadows long. Each step reminded him of the danger he faced, and he could feel eyes watching him from unseen corners. He studied tracks and environmental signs, piecing together movement patterns that suggested Harper had not been alone when he first went into hiding. Small traces disturbed soil, broken twigs, and subtle markings on trees hinted at surveillance and awareness that someone was monitoring the area closely. Cole understood that the criminals were not only cautious but skilled, orchestrating their actions with precision. The situation grew more complicated when Harper suddenly resurfaced, appearing at the edge of town in a state of deep exhaustion and fear. His story shocked everyone. He had gone into hiding after discovering direct threats against his family and had stayed in the remote cabin for weeks, moving silently to avoid detection. The revelation answered some questions but raised others. The people responsible for the disappearances and intimidation were still at large, and their ability to vanish without a trace confirmed how carefully they operated. Harper's account also suggested that some individuals within Wyoming's highest circles were implicated, deepening the gravity of the case and making the investigation increasingly dangerous. Cole began to see patterns in the threats and disappearances, connecting land disputes, political influence, and personal vendettas into a network that spanned towns and counties. He realized that uncovering the full extent of the conspiracy would require careful strategy, patience, and courage. Every move he made now carried weight. One mistake could tip off those involved, potentially endangering Harper, himself, or others. He documented everything meticulously, knowing that each detail could become a critical piece of evidence when the investigation reached the authorities capable of acting on it. As Cole delved deeper, he noticed signs of intentional manipulation in the town itself. Rumors had been spread, alliances were forming, and some residents were using fear to assert control or influence public opinion. Elk Ridge had transformed from a peaceful community into a landscape of suspicion and hidden agendas. The sheriff had to navigate this tension while also pursuing the larger investigation, balancing the safety of the town with the need to uncover the truth. Each discovery revealed more complexity, each revelation introduced new risks, and each decision had far-reaching consequences. By the time the investigation reached a critical point, it was clear that what had begun as a disappearance in the mountains had evolved into a statewide crisis. The network of corruption, intimidation, and secret dealings spanned beyond what anyone in Elk Ridge had imagined. Cole understood that exposing the full truth would require patience and strategy, but also that the danger had only begun. The shadows in the forest were no longer just physical. They represented the power, influence, and secrecy that had allowed the disappearances to occur. The stakes were high, and Cole's persistence would determine whether justice could be achieved or whether the conspirators would remain untouchable, leaving fear and uncertainty to define the state. The final chapter of the case began quietly, but its effects rippled across the entire state. Officer Garrett Cole had pursued leads for weeks, connecting the threads between the disappearances, secret land deals, and threats documented in Thomas Harper's journal. His work was painstaking, each revelation more dangerous than the last, but it gradually brought clarity to a situation that had confounded Elk Ridge and divided the state. The network of corruption he uncovered implicated individuals in positions of power, people who had operated under the assumption that no one in a small Wyoming town could challenge them. Cole's meticulous investigation, combined with Harper's testimony, eventually led to arrests. State investigators moved carefully, coordinating with law enforcement to ensure the conspirators could be apprehended without alerting others in the network. Some of the figures involved were high-profile landowners, while others were political operatives who had used their influence to manipulate property deals and intimidate witnesses. The revelations stunned the public. Newspapers and news broadcasts highlighted the courage and determination of the small-town sheriff whose instincts had sparked a chain of events leading to justice. At the same time, criticism lingered from those who felt Cole had acted recklessly, exposing the town to risk by venturing into the mountains alone. Elk Ridge slowly began to return to a semblance of normalcy, but the scars of the investigation remained. The disappearances and the fear that had taken root in the town had left a lasting impression. Families were more cautious, neighbors watched one another more carefully, and the natural rhythm of life had changed. The mountains that had once symbolized freedom and safety now carried a shadow of suspense, a reminder of what had been uncovered and the dangers that had lurked unseen. Residents spoke of the events in hushed tones, a mixture of pride in Cole's bravery and lingering unease at the scale of corruption that had existed so close to home. The legacy of Cole's decision was not just legal or procedural. It was deeply personal for the town and for Wyoming. Communities began questioning their leaders, examining transactions, and scrutinizing agreements that had previously gone unnoticed. Public trust in institutions had been shaken, but there was also a renewed sense of vigilance. The case became a symbol of accountability, a demonstration that even the most powerful individuals could be held responsible if someone had the courage to confront wrongdoing. Cole's choice to trust his instincts had created a ripple effect that extended far beyond Elk Ridge, challenging assumptions and changing the way people viewed their state. Thomas Harper, too, carried the weight of the ordeal. His experience of hiding, the threats to his family, and the exposure of those who had sought to control him left a permanent mark. Yet, by stepping forward and cooperating, he helped dismantle the network that had endangered so many lives. The town recognized that without his courage and Cole's determination, the conspiracy might never have been exposed. Years later, the events of Elk Ridge remained a defining moment in Wyoming's history. The disappearances, the hidden corruption, and the choices that led to their resolution were remembered not only as a crime story, but as a lesson in courage, vigilance, and the consequences of one person's decision. Cole's pursuit of truth had reshaped the state, leaving a legacy that combined both admiration and caution, a reminder that sometimes a single choice can change everything. The mountains returned to silence, but the story of how they had held secrets for so long continued to echo through the plains, leaving Wyoming forever altered.